Welcome, everyone, to the Prince Lyrics podcast. I am your host, Jason Brenninger. Today we are going to be talking about controversy. We're all the way up to episode 27 now, and we just crossed over into the Controversy album. And to join me to talk about Controversy, the song, the lead single off the album and the first track on the record, is Karen Shedrick. Hi, Karen.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing wonderful, thank you. Very, very well. It's awesome to be talking about Controversy now. I love the Dirty Mind album, and it's one of my top 5 favorite, but Controversy is like right behind it for me. It's so fun, and I really enjoy the kind of political stance Prince started taking at the end of Dirty Mind with Party Up, and injecting some of those topics and some of those themes into kind of already very sexual songs that he had set the tone with Dirty Mind, and now he continued on with that with Controversy. I mean, there's still a lot of sex going on in Controversy, and
Right.
but then on top of that, he like sprinkles some political viewpoints and some social commentary, and it's really kind of a cool mixture. I dig that a lot.
Absolutely. He was multifaceted, and I think he wanted people to know that and understand that as well.
Yeah, he was growing as an artist, and this is just another evolution of his sound and of his lyrics, and that's really what we're going to be digging into with this album. I mean, the music is great, and it's very joyous, especially on this song. This song has got a groove that can't be denied. Nobody can tell you that the Controversy groove isn't the jam. I mean, it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so if all he gave us was just the music of the song Controversy, it could still be an enormous hit and a really memorable song for him. But that's not all he did with this song at all.
That's right. That's right. The music, like the way it starts, you're like, wait, what? What is this? Just that groove when it first starts before you even hear any lyrics is just it just takes you there immediately.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah, Controversy was the first single off the album, as I mentioned. It was kind of the introduction to this record for a lot of people. It was the biggest hit from the album. It didn't do well on the top 40 pop charts or the top 100 pop charts, but it did very well on the dance charts and the black charts, making top 5, and then I think it even might have reached number 1 on the dance charts. So it was, even though it didn't necessarily cross over to a wide audience at the time, it was very big on those charts and big in clubs, I'm sure, and dance clubs. And it became a well-known song by Prince as a result of the success on those charts. And I'm sure it got plenty of radio play in urban markets, I would imagine. I wasn't in an urban market at the time, so I can't speak to that. Did you ever remember hearing the song on the radio, Karen?
We heard it a lot. Like you said, probably more so than the pop charts. R&B, definitely, because of that groove. I think it was more soulful, in my opinion, which is why it was more popular in, R&B markets. Yeah, we heard it a lot. A lot. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I imagine so, because there's no way it could have been as popular as it was on those charts without getting radio airplay. So that makes total sense. I unfortunately missed out on this song in its first run because of where I lived, and the access I had to those radio stations was non-existent. So I had to rely on hearing about it after the fact, after he crossed over. So, but better late than never, because this song is awesome. It's so good. It's so good. And kind of like in a similar way to how the song Dirty Mind set the tone for that album, Controversy does the exact same thing. I mean, it kicks the record off, so it's the side 1, track 1, and it's more of like a mission statement in many ways. So like Dirty Mind was more of a mission statement by just explaining to the listener, hey, this record's going to be pretty much all about sex.
Mhm.
And I'm telling you, I have a dirty mind, and that's the way this is going to go for the rest of this record. Controversy is trying to, I feel like it's trying to say something else, say a completely different thing, which he does throughout this record. And while the groove, like on Dirty Mind, is undeniable, the lyrical content is what sets it apart and makes it different. But it's still a mission statement because
Mhm.
it's letting the listener know, hey, I was all about sex on that last album. And while there will be that, trust me, there will be sex on this album,
Mhm.
I want to address other things. And a lot of those things that he wants to address are, kind of like things that have questions that have come up probably in the press or things that he has heard about himself. Because by this time, he had done some tours and he had been in the media. Dirty Mind was a although it wasn't a crossover success and it didn't sell a lot of copies, it did receive a lot of critical praise. So he was probably written about much more due to the Dirty Mind album than he might have been during the Prince record because of how critically acclaimed the record was. And so I imagine at the time there were articles coming out about Prince and any photographs of him with his attire and the way he's dressed,
Mhm.
and it probably caused a lot of questions. People read that and had a lot of questions, and he was also very coy at the time about his background, his sexuality, his race. So where
Mhm.
did he come from? Who are his parents? Is he is he gay? Things like these are the questions people probably had in their mind when reading articles about Prince because they really didn't know, and he wasn't addressing them, you know, head on. He didn't do that, and that was by
Mhm.
design.
Right. I agree with that. He wasn't doing interviews. He was projecting whatever image he wanted. So he was leaving it up to us what we thought of him or how we took him. He let his music speak for him as well. But I agree, this was the first time he actually addressed it, in his own way.
hmm
So I definitely agree with that.
And by addressing it, he doesn't address it.
Yeah, I just like, I can't believe, what people are saying about me, basically. And
uh
just going through the gamut of what he had heard, I guess, or what he had read about himself.
Yep. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. I mean, he knew what he was doing when he put those clothes on and when he would
Yes.
act that way on TV. He knew he was going to spark controversy. He knew that he was going to get people to talk about him. And Prince operated under the guise that all press is better than no press, whether it's
Right.
good or bad. And so if people were talking negatively about him, at least they were still talking about him. And while I'm
Exactly.
sure that, it's not like he didn't have feelings or that he didn't care what people said about him. I truly believe he does and did. I don't know if it was because he did it so intentionally, he had to know what kind of what kind of response he was going to get. And in many cases, it was going to be negative from some people.
Mhm.
They're going to look at him and not like what they saw, and he had to know that. This in controversy is his way of addressing it by not addressing it, by asking the questions but never answering the questions.
Right.
He still wanted to like, hey, did you even think maybe I was straight or gay? Did you even consider maybe am I black or white?
Mhm.
Because if you hadn't, you're going to now because I just asked the questions about myself in this song.
That's a great way of looking at it. Like you said, those questions may not have even come up in some people's minds who were into Prince at that point. So yeah, that's a good point that he raised his own controversy about himself in that song.
Yeah, he does. And
Mhm.
the music has always been the most important thing, and he understood that. He knew that. And it was the most important thing from day one to the end. But it was very important to him, and he's been quoted, that he didn't want to be stuck in a box musically. He didn't want to only have a certain portion of listeners. And while he valued those listeners, the R&B and the black audience, that's not all he wanted.
Right.
He wanted everybody to listen to him. And it was, I think, a true concern and fear of his that because of how segregated radio was, and MTV as as a burgeoning media outlet was also very segregated. That was a concern. It wasn't like it is today, where you turn on a pop radio and you will hear artists of every genre and every race and nationality on the pop radio. Back then, you were a black artist, you were on black radio, and that was it. You had to have had that crossover appeal. And while Prince's aesthetic at the time maybe might not have endeared him to a white audience necessarily, at least an older white audience, I should say, younger, I think younger audience was going to gravitate towards him because of what he represented for sure. But an older white audience, and usually those are the gatekeepers of radio, it's always the out of touch older person, older generation that seems to be calling the shots about who gets airplay and who can make it in the industry. And I'm sure he was concerned, like, okay, this isn't what I'm going to present, and this is what I am, but I'm not looking to be only an R&B singer. I'm not going to just make it on the R&B charts and never cross over to that audience. And when I say crossover, I don't mean like in the sense of not following his musical muse or changing his look and style to appeal to others, because we both know that's not what he did, at least with his style for sure. And yeah, he added some rock elements, but he always had rock in his music, so it's not like he was only making funk and R&B music and then all of a sudden added rock elements to his music in order to cross over. He had been doing that from the beginning. I mean, I'm Yours off of his first album is a rock song. So his ability to play multiple genres was always going to be in his favor in order to reach wider audiences and reach a number of different fans.
Absolutely. I think that was his obviously that was his ultimate goal, and I think he was pushing the envelope definitely with Dirty Mind and Controversy as far as, don't put me in a box. My music is much broader than that. Luckily the music execs made the effort to not put him in a box, but initially, like you said, in the 70s, 80s, when he first came out, because he was black, as far as they were concerned, he was a black artist, and that was it.
Yep, absolutely. And I think he had enough champions that could help him, and that was important. I mean, you can only do so much by yourself, especially back in those days before internet and social media, where you could just put your message out there and market yourself. He needed help. As much as he probably didn't want to need help, he needed help.
Right.
He needed help to reach everyone. And so we had to have people on his side that believed in him and believed in what he was going to do and what he could do. So that was important. So we're all thankful for anybody who helped Prince get out there. The lyrical standpoint of Controversy, as we mentioned, it's he's kind of really asking questions, especially in the first verse. He's asking questions that are meant to address, or even if they weren't addressing, they were instigating questions that might have come up, or that he wanted people to kind of think to themselves whether or not they were true. So, like we mentioned, he's already adding some controversy into his persona and trying to make people wonder what's Prince all about? What is he doing? We know the music, but what is this man all about? It's these days we have so many opportunities for people to tweet about themselves, or follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and you can see all these artists' day-to-day life, and there's very little mystery.
Mm-hmm.
If an artist is on social media, there's very little mystery about who they are and what they're about. And that at that time, obviously there wasn't. So listeners were reliant on lyrical content to help guide them towards understanding the artist better. Like listening to and reading into the lyrics and figuring out, based on what they're saying, what kind of person they are and what kind of background they might have come from.
Mm-hmm.
And so Prince does that very early in this first verse by asking questions without giving answers to make people think. So it starts off with, I just can't believe all the things people say. And after each one of these lines, you have the little controversy.
Mm-hmm.
That is a nice little touch. Just in case you weren't sure what the song is, and you weren't sure if these questions were meant to spark controversy, they'll remind you. I think Lisa Coleman is credited as helping out with some of the background vocals on this song, so I imagine it sounds like more of a feminine voice. Not that Prince couldn't do feminine voices, because he obviously could. Mm-hmm. So it might be a combination of Prince and Lisa doing the controversy at the end of each line. But he goes, I just can't believe all the things people say. Am I black or white? Am I straight or gay? Do I believe in God? Do I believe in me? Controversy. So right off the bat, he's asking those questions. The questions that either people had already been asking themselves or, creating new questions in our mind. Mm-hmm. Is he black or white? Because he's light skinned. I mean, we know from now his background, there is white far back in his family tree, but both of his parents were black. So, I mean, he's a black man, and we all know this now, but I can see, just looking at pictures of him at the time and not knowing, sure, could he be white? I don't know. Is he Latino?
Right. There wasn't much. There really wasn't much about him at all in the news or in the media anyway. So, like you said, this was probably questions that people hadn't really thought about concerning him, because there wasn't a lot written about him at that time.
Mm-hmm.
So this was, this might have been his way of saying, have you thought this about me? Or if you haven't, maybe you should.
Yeah, maybe you should question, what my heritage is.
Right.
I haven't thought about that. Am I straight or gay? I mean, that's always, that kind of question is, I know at least in the 80s, speaking, as a kid in the 80s, he had women, he surrounded himself with women, and he was, a lot of his songs were very sexual towards women. And of course, the movie Purple Rain, obviously he's straight in that movie, but up until that point, the way that, he sang in a high voice, and his attire during the Dirty Mind era and controversy era, with very minimal clothing, very frilly clothes, even during the 1999 era and Purple Rain era, lace and frills were a very common part of his wardrobe.
Yeah,
I'm sure that they
androgyny.
Mm-hmm. Yes, a lot of androgynous with, his features. To a lot of people that don't know him and are just getting into him and seeing this is what they see, this is what they're presented, that like, okay, this guy could be gay.
Right.
And that was a legitimate question. I know that my father, probably made some disparaging comments about his sexuality at the time. I mean, that was just how things were then.
Yes.
Men were dressing up like women all the time, and it wasn't uncommon. And while it made some people uncomfortable, it was done in a way to, I think, just create a little buzz and just be different. Step outside of the hyper-masculine, dress code that had been permeating rock music up until that point. You had the glam metal movement in the 70s that kind of started the androgynous look. Bands like New York Dolls and I mean, even Kiss with their heavy makeup, although their stage presence was very masculine, putting all that makeup on
Hmm.
was enough for some people to, question their sexuality. And Prince was doing something very similar with his look at the time. So asking the question, am I straight or gay, was not unusual. People were probably asking that question the minute they saw him on, video, or, saw a picture of him in his bikini brief underwear.
Exactly. He did the falsetto a lot at that time. And he also had the high heels as well as the makeup, and like you said, it wasn't unheard of at that time, because I always think of David Bowie when I think of Prince, the Ziggy Stardust era
Yep.
with the makeup and the heels, very similar,
Very
very
similar,
similar.
yes.
Hmm.
Yeah, and David Bowie was going through, had been doing a lot of different, playing around with his look and his personas. He had multiple personas that he used in his musical career, and one of them was a very feminine, acting and looking character.
Hmm.
And I'm sure Prince probably saw things like that and like, well, why can't I do that?
Right.
Just because I'm, an R&B artist at the time, there's no rule saying that this is only rock stars can do this. So he wanted to do something a little different, and he did. The line, "Do I believe in God? Do I believe in me?" I like that line because at the time he hadn't added a lot of spirituality into his music yet.
Hmm.
He wasn't mentioning God in the way that he did later on in his career, or even just
Right.
in a couple, 2, 3 years. And that line, you could read it a couple different ways, I think. One way that I was thinking of it when I was looking at the lyrics again was that is he asking himself, or asking, the question, does he believe in God? Do I believe in me? Is that more of saying, like, is he just, kind of a egotist, self-centered, where, if you believe in God, you're saying that you believe in a higher calling, you believe in something else besides what's in front of you, like you believe in a power that's outside of the physical realm. But then you say something like, "Do I believe in me?" Yeah, that's asking, do you believe in yourself? Do you have, like, literally it means, do I believe in my abilities and myself? But I also wonder if he's like the religion of Prince. Am I saying, do
Mm.
I believe in God, like something else?
Hmm.
Or do I believe in me, i.e. the religion of Prince, meaning like I'm self-centered, I'm an egotist, and it's all about me. And that's one way that I looked at it. How do you kind of take those lines?
I took it as literally two different questions. Like the first part, do I believe in God? He could be asking himself that question, or he could be, saying, are you asking, do I believe in God? Because of the way I dress, and because of the way I look, and because I'm highly sexual, could you possibly believe in God the way you are? And then the second question, do I believe in me? I took that to be a question that he was asking himself. Like, with the way I'm bringing this to you, with the way I'm presenting myself, am I believing myself to be this person? That I'm showing you. Is this really who I am? So that's kind of how I took it, like two literally different questions.
Yeah, no, that's
Yeah.
good. I like that interpretation as well. I think and you bring up a good point. Like, there's people that believe, if you're going to believe in God and you're going to be a religious person, a religious man or woman, you have to act a certain way, you have to dress a certain way, you can't talk about this or that.
Hmm.
And what Prince had been speaking about in his songs and his appearance would not lead the casual observer to think that, religion meant a lot to this person. Like, I don't want to say the word heathen, but
Right.
I'm sure there were people that were thinking he was, and, he needed to find Jesus.
Right, exactly. He
And
couldn't he
Prince is
couldn't
like, hey,
possibly be. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, you know what? he's always had religion. I'm sure, just like a lot of people, young people, religion may have not as been as important to him at the time, but it's not much later that he's recording a song called God that ends up being the B-side to Purple Rain. So I don't know, if I've never really read anything too much about how religious Prince really was in his early career, but we know that he talks about it, and we know that and we'll get to it later, he says the Lord's Prayer in this song. So
Yeah.
I think he's always had religion.
I think he grew up, and I could be wrong. I think he grew up Seventh-day Adventist, but
Yeah, sounds
I
right.
think that, yeah, I think that was part of his childhood. But once he got older, I'm sure I mean, obviously he was spiritual. Spiritual. He did believe in God, but he was also very creative, and he wanted to be himself. Just, I don't want to say despite that. I think it was certainly a part of who he was, and he wasn't afraid to let people know that, as well as letting people know his sexual side, or his, I guess, controversial side. Hint.
Hmm.
But yeah,
Yeah.
he did grow up with faith,
Yeah.
and he always expressed that later on.
I don't believe personally that to be spiritual requires you to be a part of an organized religion,
I don't either.
um, or to be, to have to attend a service every Sunday, and then that's the only way that you can be close to God. I don't
Mhm.
believe that at all, and I don't. And even though Prince, after he became Jehovah's Witness, appeared to be much more practicing, from a more traditional standpoint. Who knows at the time whether this was written, how what level of church going he was, if at all. But
Mhm.
I don't think that really changed anything about what he believed and what he, had in him as his spirituality and his beliefs, his religious beliefs. His attendance in a church or even being associated with an organized religion, I don't necessarily think was important to him either. And but I don't know this for a fact. This is just what I speculate.
Mhm.
Okay, so then the verse continues on after what I believe is Prince and Lisa probably just harmonizing again, controversy, making sure to to hammer home the point that these are all meant to be controversial statements. I can't understand human curiosity. So that line, he's addressing basically the questions that have come up that I'm sure he's heard. Why is this such a big deal to everybody? Why do you care if I'm black or
Mhm.
white? Why do you care if I'm straight or gay? Why is that important?
Mhm.
So he's just like, I can't understand this human curiosity in other people. Was it good for you? Was I what you wanted me to be? Controversy. Do you get high? Does your daddy cry? Controversy. So that's the rest of the verse. And those questions are more like rhetorical questions. you
I
know,
think so. Like
was it good for
anything.
you? Yeah. They're not really meant to be answered. They're not quite as straightforward, as the first handful of questions. Was it good for you? Was I what you wanted me to be? Those are just, more questions. They could be added or they could be questions about his sexual performance to a person that he's been with, or they can just be
Mhm.
questions to the listener.
Mhm.
Do you like my music? Is this what you expected when you bought my record? Did I give you what you wanted? Um, did you see me in concert? Did I live up to your expectations? Those are the types of, I think, probably questions he was asking. And then, do you get high? Does your daddy cry? Those are just, I think, once again, rhetorical questions, but they're more just questions to address the types of things that people were curious about. Drug use, and does your daddy cry? What's your home life like? I mean, we didn't have the backstory that the mythical backstory yet, about Purple Rain kind of introduced with his relationship with his father. So I think reading into that line too much is probably incorrect at this point. Not sure he was writing songs about his dad at that time. Maybe he was.
And it just could have been an example of, how far-fetched people can go as far as the type of questions they can ask. Like, does your daddy cry? It could get that crazy.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, right. I mean, how much more information do you need from me? How deep do you want to get? It's before it becomes like really invasive and too personal. And asking questions about drug use, do you get high? There's a perception that musicians use drugs, whether or not they're using marijuana or something much more heavy and dangerous. The questions always are out there about musicians, and there's, like I said, assumptions, especially due to like a lot of what happened in the 60s. It's a question that people were, I'm sure, were asking.
Right.
All right, so then the chorus, he goes back into the questions about religion and believing in me. He says, do I believe in God? Do I believe in me? So he repeats that line, but then he rhymes it with, some people want to die so they can be free. Life is just a game. We're all just the same. Controversy. And he repeats controversy lines a little bit. So the chorus is cool. I like the chorus. It's very, the way it's sang, do 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 do. Just he sings those lines along with the groove. The keyboard, right. The synth groove. So it's almost like it's combined with the synth line, and the synth line is memorable. And then you throw those words on top of it, and anybody can sing these lines. And to think about him though, what is he saying? Outside of, well, already, do I believe in God? Do I believe in me? Which we've talked about. Some people want to die so they can be free. That's an interesting line to me. What do you think about that line?
Well, that whole snippet right there, to me, it tells me that anybody can have controversy in their lives. And the whole thing about some people want to die so they can be free, I thought he was talking about suicide at that point.
Yeah, me too.
We're all the same, meaning, we're all trying to get through this thing called life.
Yeah.
And we can all have situations that are controversial in our own lives. That's what I got from that. Like, we're all the same in this. I'm no different than you are. So I kind of like that he brought us all together in that. This isn't just about me. This could be about you too.
Yeah, that's good insight, because in the in the first verse, he's talking about things that are more controversial subjects about Prince. Mm-hmm. Things that probably had been talked about him, or at least thought about him. But in the chorus, because it's the chorus, and we're trying to tie it all together in a chorus typically, and make something that is going to be relatable, create something relatable. Like you said, he brings it back around to kind of address overall types of issues and concerns people have in their lives. So, yeah, like you said, some people want to die so they can be free, to me is also very much a line about suicide. Like, people who commit suicide do it because they're in so much pain that they just want to be free of that pain. And that is, to me, what he's saying as well. So I'm total agreement with that. And it's just an interesting way of putting it, because those of us who are not, in that much pain, it's hard to fathom being in so much pain that you'd want to end your life. Unless you're in that situation, unless you're in that dark place, it's very difficult for most of us to be able to kind of relate to that and understand how things can get so bad for somebody. So him saying that is just kind of shedding a light, like, hey, these people, they want to be free of their pain, and this is the only way they see to die. Mm-hmm.
Right.
And life is just a game. We're all just the same. Yeah, we're all just the same in the way that we're all dealing with our own shit, basically.
That's it. And like, I'm dealing with controversy, but so can you in your own life. Yeah.
Yep. And what is that controversy, and can we get through it together? And after this, then is the time. This is a fairly long song. It's like a 7 minute song. So I mean, we're kind of going through the lyrics as if it's just lyrics and chorus, but there's a lot of music in this song, and there's a lot of like repeating the refrains, especially in the second half. But kind of in the middle of the song, he recites the Lord's Prayer, and this is where he does that. He basically says the Lord's Prayer. He says it very deliberately. It's very stretched out. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Because, he's trying to say it along with the beat.
Yeah.
So that's part of it. He has to stretch it out to be on beat. And I believe, and I read somewhere that the inclusion of the Lord's Prayer in this song, in and of itself, was a controversial act. So in a song about controversy, reciting the Lord's Prayer from a rock star, from a musician who many thought was probably used drugs, had a lot of premarital sex, was living a lifestyle that was not becoming of a religious man. To have this prayer in the middle of a pop song was blasphemous, and that was probably some people's take on that.
I do too. But I think I was really surprised that he did it, but I felt like he was saying, hey, I can be spiritual, be proud of it. Let me show you what I know. Yes, I know the Lord's Prayer, but I can also be sexual too.
Yeah, I'm sure people looked at it as being disingenuous, that he was just doing it as an art piece. But, as we know from later on in his career, he was religious. He was spiritual. So throwing the Lord's Prayer in controversy is like one of the really first clues that we had as listeners that this was important to him. That spirituality and God was important to him.
Absolutely. In the same song, yes.
Yeah, right. Like I said, throwing this prayer in this song was, in fact, a controversial move. And so it's fitting for him to do that in a song called Controversy. It's fitting. So then he goes back into the controversy. There's a lot of repeated refrains of controversy. And, the synth line again, the do controversy. So we get that quite a bit. But then towards the end, there's kind of like, I don't know if it's another verse or a refrain or what you want to call it, but he has this little bit of a chant. People call me rude. I wish we all were nude. I wish there was no black and white. I wish there were no rules. And he repeats that several times before going back into the groove again. So the rude, people call me rude, he was wearing that rude boy pin at the time on his purplish jacket that he had on the cover of the album, and he was also wearing that jacket during the Dirty Mind era. I wish we were all nude. For me, that's like saying I wish we were all nude, like almost saying I wish we were all just as innocent as we were when we were born. The day we were born, we were all naked the day we were born, and there's a lot of, obviously, infants and babies are very innocent. They've never committed, quote unquote, sin, unless you believe everybody's born with sin, which obviously some religions believe that. But I don't know. I wish we all were nude is kind of a line you could look at a different way, in a few different ways. Going back to innocence, being like we're just back to square one, Adam and Eve times, or we're all nude from a sexual standpoint. I wish we were all nude, so it's that hedonistic kind of approach towards human sexuality, the freedom of or being judged by our clothes, being judged by our attire, and if we're all nude, nobody can judge us for that. What do you think about that line in particular? I wish we all were nude.
Well, I have to say, back in the day, I went sexual with that. I was like, ooh. But, I wish we all were naked. Hey, but, like you did, as I got older, I started thinking, well, maybe he meant, nude, meaning we're all on the same page, because like you said, with clothing, You can look at people's clothing and make judgments about them, whether they're rich or poor, this and that. But if we're all nude, we're all on the same page. We're all on the same level.
Yep.
So yeah, I definitely got that, later in life. But yeah, in the beginning, I thought it was sexual. But then you can't really think of it as just sexual, because he's thinking, he's saying, I wish there were no black and white. I wish there were no rules, meaning that we're all the same,
Mm-hmm.
which he mentioned in the chorus, we're all just the same. So I think that reiterated what he was the point he was trying to make, that we're all the same. I'm no different than you, and I wish there weren't black and white or rules. I wish we were all, on the same level.
Yeah, yeah, and Prince, as we know, this is not new, but he's done the sex and as a metaphor for greater things. So I'm sure, I wish we all were nude was, it meant both, because that's what he did. It meant he had the sexual meaning, and it also had a deeper meaning, because that was so much of what he did. And it's not, at this point, it's not surprising that he would use something that could be construed as strictly sexual to also mean something else, and to also have a different meaning to it. And then I wish there was no black and white. I wish there were no rules. When I hear these lines, when I think of these lines, it kind of a little bit takes me back to Imagine by John Lennon. In that song, he's imagining a world where all these things that kind of divide us didn't exist. He wishes there was no heaven or hell. He wishes there were no countries. He wishes there was no religion, because in this song, he's imagining the things that divide us not existing, so that we could all just love one another. And that was the hippie approach that John Lennon took for that song. And when I hear the line, I wish there was no black and white, I wish there were no rules, Prince to me is trying to do kind of something similar with that. Like, as we know, Prince later in his career completely and 100% embraced his blackness. But at this time in his career, in songs like Uptown and songs like Controversy, he's trying to, I think, say that there's so much that divides us. Why don't we kind of strip some of that away, and we're all just trying to get along. We all just want to love one another and stop this fighting and all these stupid things that divide us. And if there was no black and white, if we were literally all just the same, as you mentioned, we wouldn't have that to fight about. There wouldn't be that. There wouldn't be racism. There wouldn't be prejudgments based on just the color of skin or how somebody looks. We would judge people based on who they were. And that's what I get from this line as well. Not to say that we all need to be the same color. It's more of just, let's take away the stuff that divides us.
Exactly. I agree.
And see what kind of a society we can develop without all of this bullshit that keeps us apart before we even meet each other.
I agree, and I think the song set the tone for the whole album, because if you look at the cover, he's got all those headlines, war and this and that separates us, and the other songs on the album kind of reflect that. So I do think that the whole strip away the things that divide us, if we don't do that, it's gonna cause more problems in the world. So, yeah.
Setting ourselves up for failure by falsely creating divisions amongst us through race, through like I said, socioeconomic status, people looking down on you because you're poor, or even vice versa, like having a prejudgment of somebody's character because they're well off.
Right.
It can go both ways, and I mean it's kind of an idealized look at society and wanting this and hoping for this. And this is his way of communicating his wishes at the time, and it's funny because later on, I think it's like the next album, he he's like, take a bath, hippie. You know, he seems that Prince always seems to have like this thing against hippies, or at least
Mhm.
hippie culture. And I think that was just a product of his generation, because his generation weren't hippies. It was his parents' generation, or the generation ahead of him or before him. He was a kid in the 60s during the hippie movement, like a young kid, like, you know, too
Mhm.
young to really partake in it. And it's in his mind, I think, and in people's mind at the time, like the punks and some of the new wavers and those who were trying to do something different through art. Hippies were seen as, you know, not ideal, like that. They tried that and it didn't work. And but a lot of what Prince is saying in this song has roots in that, in those ideologies that, you know, the hippies from the 60s were trying to push for, like peace and love, you know. And it's like, really, that's what he wants too. So he's just going about it differently, and that's fine. You know, every generation has to have their own way and find their own way to communicate what they want. And Prince is doing that in this song for sure. He starts off communicating all of these controversial statements about him, but then he later on in the song, throughout the song, brings it back to us, you know, pointing a
Mhm.
mirror at us as a society and saying, this is what is wrong with us in many ways. We're asking all these stupid questions that
Creating controversy that shouldn't
creating
be.
creating controversy where there doesn't need to be any controversy. And all it does is just divide us. So who cares if I'm black or white? Who cares if I'm straight or gay? I mean, yes, we know later on he definitely embraces his blackness, as I mentioned, but at the time, I think he's just fed up with it. He doesn't, these questions are not important to him. He's trying to get music out there. He's trying to
There you go.
become a relevant musician. He wants people to listen to him, and he's afraid that if he is only seen as a black man, and he will only be played on black radio, R&B stations, and he'll never reach the level of success and reach that he feels he deserves, and obviously did deserve. So these questions to him were just probably trivial and unimportant, and he a little bit fed up with it.
Absolutely. I agree. I think he used that song as a like a calling card to stop the madness. Let me just do my thing and listen to my music and don't worry about what I look like or where I came from. Listen to the music, listen to what I have to say, listen to that.
hmm
Yeah.
Yep, and he does a great way of doing that is by addressing it head on instead of ignoring it and pretending it didn't exist. He addresses it head on in this track, and stop the madness, man. That was a good way to kind of phrase it, because there was a lot of madness, I'm sure, at the time. So we've reached the end then of the lyrics of Controversy. It is my favorite song on the album. I mean, it's not a very unique favorite song because it seems to be a very popular song from this record, but I mean, it's my favorite song for a reason. The music is so amazing on this track. It's a song that you can easily sing along to, because while he's saying a lot, it's not sung in a complex way. You
Yeah.
can
And if
the
you don't
line.
know anything, controversy, you know that.
Yes, right. There's been times, I'm sure, my kids, they do it too, and I'm listening to the song, they'll just pipe in with the controversy at the end of each line, because at
Mhm.
least, if nothing else, though, that line is clear and easily sung, and because of the way it's sung, interestingly enough, it's fun to sing. So,
Mhm.
do you have any final thoughts on the song Controversy, Karen? What do you think of this song overall and the scope of the album?
Like I said before, I think it just sets the tone for the album. The music is infectious. I mean, you can't forget that beat. Like I said at the beginning, you're like, wait a minute, what is this? You're ready for it. So I think it was a good lead song into that album. I definitely do.
hmm
Yeah.
Yeah, it deserves to be side A, track one, for sure.
Absolutely.
It's any place else on this album wouldn't make any sense at all. There's a lot to talk about in this song. Let's just put it that way.
Yeah, it was. And when I listened to it, decades ago, I didn't think that there was a lot to it. But when you really break it down, there was a whole lot to it. So yeah, I'm
Yeah.
glad I was able to do this.
Yeah, I mean, this is the whole point of me doing this podcast because there's so much more to Prince's lyrics than what meets the eye, I think.
Mhm.
And if you, because the music is so good, you just get lost in that in many cases, and you
Right.
don't think too deeply into it. And I wanted, as much as I love the music and the music draws me in tremendously, I want to strip away some of that and really just focus on what is he saying and what is he trying to say and what do we think
Mhm.
he's trying to say, because we're just speculating and it's our own interpretation. But
Mhm.
I think we're pretty spot on most of the time.
Yeah, I do too.
You've been listening to the Press Rewind Prince Lyrics podcast. I've been your host, Jason Brenninger. Thanks to Karen Shedrick again for joining me on the controversy episode. Hopefully everyone enjoyed that one and took something away from the dissection of the lyrics. I sure had a good time recording it, so thank you very much for listening, and until next time, goodbye.